While researching my last case, that of Catherine Gorospe, it reminded me of a British case where similarly kindness was repaid with incredible cruelty and brutality. And in a case where so much evidence was caught on CCTV, information that the perpetrator was the son of police officers added salt to a deep and scathing wound. The victim was a young woman of huge potential, and that potential was curtailed when she offered to do an acquaintance a favour. This is the cruel murder of Megan Newton, and this is Murder of Crows, isn't it? It is, isn't it? Before we start, I need to give a shout out to our latest member. So a big welcome to Mel. Now, Mel was already a very good friend and was a founding member of the Crow community. But she's now also a member. So hurrah and huzzah! Happy dance. Anyway, back to more serious matters. Today's case takes us to Stoke-on-Trent, and it's an area of the UK that I know pretty well, as I used to work in the neighbouring area of Newcastle. No, not that one. The lesser known Newcastle, that being Newcastle under Lyme. Stoke-on-Trent, often abbreviated simply to Stoke, is a city in Staffordshire, which is a county in England. Has an area of 36 square miles or 93 square kilometers. Don't know if you needed to know that, but you do now. You get value here. In 2022, the city had an estimated population of 259,965. It is the largest settlement within the Staffordshire county, and it is surrounded by the towns of Newcastle under Lyme, Alsager, Kidsgrove and Biddulph. And those towns effectively form the suburban areas of the city. Now, the city was originally formed from the federation of 6 towns back in 1910. No, I hadn't been born yet, how very dare you. It took its name from the town of Stoke-upon-Trent, where the main centre of government and the principal railway station in the district were located. And today, Hanley is the primary commercial area of the city, and the other 4 towns which form the city are Burslem, Tunstall, Longton and Fenton. In tradition and history, Stoke-on-Trent was the home of the pottery industry in England, leading to the city actually being known as the Potteries. Since the 17th century, the area has been almost exclusively known for its industrial scale pottery manufacturing. Many globally renowned companies like Royal Doulton, Dudson, Spode, Wedgwood, Minton and Baker and Company were all established and based in the area of Stoke-on-Trent. Saul Hudson, don't worry, you will know who he is. The lead guitarist for Guns N' Roses, better known by his stage name of Slash, was born in Stoke-on-Trent. His father, Anthony Hudson, was from the Stoke area, and he spent a few of his early childhood years living in the city, before moving to his mother's native land of the United States in 1970. And most importantly, in terms of Stoke-on-Trent, most importantly, the ultimate god of hard rock and heavy metal, Ian Kilmister, better known as Lemmy, was born in Stoke. Now on to something much less palatable that happened in Stoke, and this happened on the 20th of April 2019. 18-year-old Megan Newton was a clever and ambitious young lady. She lived in a small apartment within Stoke-on-Trent. Megan worked as a youth football coach, which was a great career for her as she loved sports and she loved coaching children. She herself played for the Stoke Town under-18 ladies team and still gave up her weekends to coach the Norton Wanderers under-7s team. Away from football, she wanted to be the first person in her family to go to university, where she was planning to study either physiotherapy or sports therapy, both of which would tie into her love of football. And ultimately, she did hope to get a scholarship to study in the United States, where women's football has a very strong foothold. Even in her free time, Megan loved to get involved in other sports activities. She volunteered for some other football clubs and would help fundraising efforts to raise money for those clubs to be able to get kits to play. So she was very, very pro-social, loved football, and had bags of potential. Now, on the day in question, which was a Saturday and was the 20th of April, Megan was working at her part-time job at a fish and chip shop. It was around 10:20 p.m. when she finished work. She went home to get changed and went out again, like many young people these days whose evenings don't start till about 11 p.m, by which time I want Horlicks and a hot water bottle. But she wanted to meet some friends for a night out. She arrived at the pub to meet her friends at 11 p.m, and then they went on to a nightclub, with Megan having a really, really good night with her friends, and she was showing off her new tattoo to her friends. So all in all, much fun was had by everyone. When the nightclub closed, Megan headed to the taxi rank in the town centre, intending to get a cab home. By this time it was around 3:45 a.m, and there were a number of people who had left the now closing clubs to come out to get a taxi. And one of the people waiting in line was 19-year-old Joseph Trevor. Now, Megan knew Joseph from school, and they started speaking about how their respective evenings had gone. Joseph had been out with his friends too. He went to a pub first and ended up in the same nightclub that Megan had been at, but their paths hadn't crossed across the course of the night. Joseph was a semi-professional footballer, so given that both of their lives revolved around football, they had plenty to talk about, as well as how their nights had gone. And in addition, they knew some of the same people. Now, Joseph was concerned, and he seemed anxious about something, and he told Megan that he was afraid to go home. He had drunk a lot of alcohol that night, and he'd also taken drugs. He had also been stopped by the police earlier in the day and had a bag of ketamine confiscated from him. Trevor had walked free from custody after being detained for possession of drugs. Now, Joseph Trevor's parents both worked for Staffordshire Police, so one would assume that they probably had a dim view of drugs and the people that took them. And in addition, as Joseph was a semi-professional footballer, again, drugs probably frowned upon. Yet this young man had taken ketamine and possibly also cocaine before he'd been taken to the police station, where he was searched, but ultimately was released, where he went off to enjoy the rest of his night out with friends. Now, Megan, being big of heart, said that he could stay at her apartment on the couch until he'd sobered up and could reflect on things the next morning. And this was the kind of thing Megan always did. She was always keen to help others. Now, Joseph's father, who was a former police officer, he'd retired, but he sent Joseph a text to see where he was. And Joseph said that he was going to be staying with a male friend. At this point, Joseph and Megan got into a taxi and they arrived at her apartment at around 4 a.m. CCTV showed them going into the apartment and they were talking amiably enough and everything seemed absolutely fine, above board, all in order, everyone's a winner. But 90 minutes later, Joseph was seen on CCTV leaving Megan's apartment. Now, him leaving was not really of concern because he may have decided to face the music and go home, but 90 minutes seems very little time. But the CCTV also showed him throwing away what appeared to be keys on his way out of the apartment block. Letting himself out, he appeared to throw away these keys and calmly walked to a bridge over the A500 in Stoke, where he was seen with his legs on the wrong side of the railings of the bridge. Here he was spotted by a passer-by, and Joseph Trevor was taken to Harplands Hospital, from where he was collected by his father. At this point, no one knew that anything was amiss other than Joseph having had his dalliance with the side of the bridge. It was only when neighbours found the keys covered in blood later that morning that they let themselves into Megan's flat. And they found Megan naked, lying on the bed, face down. Later analyses would work out that she had been strangled for 15 to 30 seconds as a minimum before being knifed. She had been strangled and stabbed in the back 9 times. When Joseph Trevor learned that Megan's body had been discovered, he confided to his family and close friends that he had done something bad. And, quelle surprise, he was later arrested. The trial was set for February of 2020. It was here that Joseph Trevor pleaded guilty to her murder and 2 additional charges of rape on what was to be the first day of his trial. The 19-year-old was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 21 years and 65 days. He was also placed on the sex offenders register indefinitely. Judge Michael Chambers QC said that Joseph Trevor, the son of a retired police officer, carried out a Brutal and sustained attack conducted in a most callous way in her own home. The court heard that Megan, who knew Trevor from school, had, as an act of kindness, given him a place to sleep. Prosecutor Adrian Keeling QC said that she had invited him back because he got so drunk on drink and drugs he could not face going home to his parents. He raped her, strangled her unconscious, then stabbed her in the back 8 or 9 times. The court also heard that Joseph Trevor had been accused of orally raping a 14-year-old girl. And, well, this case was never prosecuted, but in mitigation, he was only 15 himself. But it did lead to people having a certain image of him, certainly in terms of sexual acts. At the end of the proceedings, Judge Michael Chambers QC said, "She had invited you to stay in her home that night as an act of kindness because you had too much alcohol and drugs. You felt you were in no fit state to go home to your parents." The attack on her was driven and motivated by your serious and violent sexual conduct. You raped her. You went on to strangle her. You further went on to arm yourself with a knife from the kitchen area and stabbed her no less than 9 times to the neck and back, penetrating her chest and both lungs. This was a brutal and sustained attack conducted in the most callous way in her own home. The judge went on to say in sentencing, "The starting point is 30 years. The gross aggravating feature was the sustained and brutal rapes. She must have suffered for some significant time. This was an appalling offence." Joseph Trevor was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years and 65 days before he can be considered for release by the parole board. And, as I said, he was placed on the sex offenders register for life. Samantha Dixon from the CPS, or Crown Prosecution Service, was quoted as saying, Megan Newton should be alive today, and she is not because of Joseph Trevor. She offered nothing but kindness to him, and he cut her life short in the most heinous way. He then tried to claim he had no memory of what happened. But thanks to the testimony of a psychiatrist, DNA evidence, and CCTV footage, there was overwhelming evidence against him, and he had no choice but to admit his guilt. My thoughts are with Megan's family for the incredible grief that they are suffering. In a tribute read in court on behalf of the family, Megan's grandmother, Beryl Smith, said, "Megan's death has wiped out that spark in our lives. We're heartbroken and always will remain so." She went on to say that Megan's mother Sarah felt that she had a best friend in Megan, but had lost the promise of her life and future grandchildren. Megan's father, Michael Bagley, said, "The thought of never seeing her beautiful smile or hearing her voice again breaks my heart. How could this happen to such an amazing, caring, kind, loving, funny young lady? This is something I will never understand or get over." Megan's football team, Stoke Town Football Club, set up a memorial trophy to honour their murdered football player, with the club's secretary quoted as saying, "Megan was loved by us all, players, coaching staff and parents. She was a formidable player and a very well respected team member. She was always smiling and had a very mischievous nature, which was very endearing." And that was yet another case where a good deed did not go unpunished. Doing a favour for someone who was afraid to go home and face his parents, which in itself indicated that this being was a coward as well as a cockwomble. We have yet another man who did what he wanted, then worried about the consequences later. Thankfully, despite having parents who both worked with the police, his attempts to cover his tracks and equally his awareness of CCTV cameras was almost non-existent. And we, as a decent and righteous public, need to be grateful for that fact. He will only be 40 years old when he is first eligible for parole. And I just hope that he is not allowed out of prison. As even though he was 18 at the time of the offence and still had a level of development to go through, I firmly believe that people with his nature do not change. So it would be in the public's best interest for him to remain incarcerated or beaten to death with a soggy fish, but I assume that that's a no-go. Megan Newton was a talented footballer, an empathetic and caring coach, and a very good friend. She was just 18 when her life was callously cut short. She had enormous potential and would have succeeded in anything she chose to do, I have absolutely no doubt. She was driven, determined, and had bags of ability. Unfortunately, the fact that she also had a big heart was used against her in the most cruel of ways. This video is unquestionably dedicated to her, and I send love to her friends and family as they try to deal with this enormous and devastating loss. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. All likes, shares and subscribers really help me out, so don't be shy. It doesn't cost you anything. But with that said, I'm Steve. This is Samson. It is, isn't it? You're Samson, aren't you? I believe. And we will see you when we see you.
Say